Welcome to the missed meeting of the Planning Committee, both to members and to the public who are looking on. I'll read the usual notice. For the purpose of public transparency and accountability, the meeting will be live streamed online.
I've had to turn mine on to switch it off, if that makes any sense, because it was crackling, so I've had to turn it on to turn it off. I definitely need a new one because that's broken.
How's mine?
Right, well, I'll start again then. Can you hear me now? Is that crackling?
That was crackling when it was even turned off.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Thank you.
Do you have? Transparency and accountability. The meeting will be live streamed online. Details of how to access the live stream will be made available on the Council's website in due course. For health and safety reasons and in accordance with our risk assessment, members of the public are asked to follow the meeting via this method.
Chair, I'm really sorry, it sounds terrible. If that's the feedback going out to the public, they won't be able to hear you. I'm really sorry, Chair, it's really terrible.
Yeah. I'll ask the question. Members of the public, if you're there, can you hear me all right?
You're just crackly.
Crappy. Crackly. Sorry.
Crackly. There's a definite crackle to your voice, but otherwise,
Yes,
I can understand you fine.
You can understand what I'm saying. Well, I think that's all that matters for the moment.
I think the answer
Yes, thank you.
is them all off. Go turn them all on, and then turn one off each time. See which one's
Right.
crackling.
Can we start the meeting, please? For health and safety reasons, in accordance with our risk assessment, members of the public are asked to follow the meeting via the method I've just outlined, but even though they cannot attend any physical meeting in person. Members of the public wishing to speak at the meeting will be able to do so remotely, and the details of how to do this have been provided. They will be allowed to speak each for 3 minutes only. Are there any apologies for absence?
Apologies have been received from Councillors Hope, Mackenzie and Windress. Councillor Dockwra will substitute for Councillor Mackenzie. There are no substitutes for Councillors Hope and Councillor Windress.
Thank you. I have to say this is terrible. Declarations of interest. Does anybody wish to make a declaration of interest? Councillor Potter.
Yes, Chair, I've been lobbied on item 6. It's personal, non-pecuniary and non-prejudicial. Thank you.
The Thackeray.
Yes, thank you. I'll just try and find out how I describe it. The application is determined by the Development Control Manager in accordance with the Scheme of Delegated Divisions, item 4. I appreciate that these are already dealt with, but I do have a question there when it comes to it. And the declaration of interest is that one of the objectors to the application is my brother and my sister-in-law.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Items 6 and 10. 6 have been lobbied by letter and email, personal, non-pecuniary, non-prejudicial. And for the benefit of the rest of the committee, item 10, the applicant is a friend and fellow councillor.
Councillor Mason.
Item 10, obviously, personal pecuniary, and I have been lobbied on item 6.
And as far as item 10, I would declare a personal interest on the basis that I know Councillor Mason reasonably well. Have you?
I'm mixing up my papers. I've also been lobbied by email on item 6. Thank you.
Actually, I just need to change my microphone. It's gone. It's very colourful.
We just have to make do with what the equipment that we've got, I'm afraid.
Can we take it as read, Chair, that we all know Councillor Mason for item 10?
I would think so. Is that agreeable?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Chairman.
Would somebody move the minutes as an accurate record of what was discussed at the last meeting? Councillor Cleary, seconded. Councillor Potter. Do we all agree? Can I take this by affirmation? Yeah. Yes, of course. Everybody else in agreement? So that's 3 abstentions. Weren't you here? I thought you were here. Right. That's 4 abstentions. The rest of us are in agreement. Okay. Urgent business, there is none, and that brings us to the schedule of items to be determined by the committee. And the first item is at Twitchwood Village Street, Howsham, and this is for the erection of a replacement dwelling, one number 4-bedroom detached dwelling with associated parking and landscaping, with change of use of land to rear to form additional domestic curtilage to include demolition of outbuilding and extension and alteration of existing stables to form home office and store. We have had a site visit on this, and 3 members visited the site. Rachel, would you like to take us through this, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, members. Yes, this application is returning to members after it was deferred at the last planning committee for a site visit, which took place on Monday the 13th of September. And it concerns the replacement of the existing dwelling and the extension, alteration and associated change of use of the land to incorporate outbuildings into the domestic curtilage. We have had 1 additional representation which has been received this evening, and officers have also become aware that members have been written to by one of the objectors, but we've not had sight of that material. The recommendation remains one of approval, subject to a plan reference substitution with regards to the layout plan, and that relates to the layout plan that was seen by members at the last planning committee. If I can now briefly read out the submission, and this is a submission in support from number 8 Howsham, which is directly next door to Wychwood. The proposed development will furnish the village with a well-made house. The design has been judged by impartial planners and adjusted to fit well into the streetscape of Howsham. It will replace a house that is very much of its era, and the resulting improvement will benefit the neighbourhood measurably. The proposed works will be lengthy and disruptive, to be sure, but the existing property must be replaced at some point soon, and the new property will be far better to serve the needs of the family who live there now and those to live there in the coming decades. There are concerns about the impact of the rebuilding work on adjoining property at number 9, and we would hope that sensitive negotiation during the build phase may go some way to settling these. We are very satisfied that the owners do not intend to increase local light pollution or bring additional vehicles onto their property, or in any other way reduce the amenity of neighbouring buildings in our village. In summary, we're pleased to support the application as presented, and that's from Mike Shaw, Elaine Phillips of number 8 Howsham. If I can now take members through the site photos. I guess for the benefit of the members who weren't here at the last meeting, this is sort of an overview of the site, and you have the property to be replaced on the sort of left half of the site, and the structure that is to the rear of the site, in effect you can see it as a sort of white structure to the rear. That is the stable block, which is effectively to be extended to form the outbuildings and in effect to create the office and the store.
Excuse me, Rachel, is it possible to make this full screen, do you think?
Yep. Members, would it help if I stood up and went over and pointed as well? Yeah, I have no pointy shiny thing to. So. This is effectively the boundary of the existing domestic curtilage. And then this is the outbuilding that is to be extended no further than here, by my finger. And this is the Nissen hut, which is next photo, please. So yes, this is the rear elevation of the property, and that boundary fence in the foreground of the shot is in effect the delineation of the domestic curtilage as it currently stands. Next photo, please. And this is to show the relationship of the existing property relative to number 9. That is their sort of gable end of their property. Next shot, please. This is taken from the churchyard, and that is in effect one of the sort of key views of it that you can see of the existing property, and that you would see of the property as it's redeveloped. And obviously it's part of the conservation area and contributes to the setting of the Grade 1 listed building, St John's Church. This is to the southern elevation, and this in effect is the sort of rear extension of number 8 Howsham, and this in effect forms their sort of like a main sort of conservatory kitchen living space, but you wouldn't have any views resulting from the property as extended due to the boundary fence that's in place. Next photo, please. Yes, so this is in effect on the other side of the property, and it's the access drive that takes you to number 9 Howsham, and to the right of the screen is number 10 Howsham, and to the left is Witchwood, the property to be demolished. Next, please. So this is in effect looking in a westerly direction. You can see the stables, which are to be extended, and the Nissen hut to be demolished, and then you can see Witchwood as it currently presents in the rear of the shot. Thank you. Next shot. And that's a head-on shot, so you can see the scale of the existing buildings and their relationship to the boundary, you can see that there is the mature Lelandai hedge, which is within the adjoining properties ownership and therefore control. And yes, next shot please. And this is a shot just to show the wider curtilage and the wider setting of the site, and the proposed outbuilding would not extend beyond the existing structure that you see there. So the domestic curtilage wouldn't extend beyond that gate and that fence. And that is the site layout plan that was submitted while the application was on the agenda, and it just gives some additional details with regards to dimensions and a clarification with regards to the boundary in relation to Wychwood and number 9 Howsham. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions. I understand that the agent wishes to speak. Louise Priestman, are you there?
Yes, I'm here if you can hear me okay.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this project. I know it's been ongoing for a long time for the clients. Now, as a conservation accredited architect, my priority is ensuring that any building is a betterment of what is already there. And I do genuinely believe that this design reflects that. To ensure that we did this, we also created a characterization study. This study helped assess all the significant parts of Howsham, which turns out to be quite a lot. And we also used this as guidelines for designing it, as well as the Rural Design Guide, which is an excellent resource, and local planning policy. Now, as part of the study, we also did a full 3D mock-up on SketchUp to make sure that any proposal would not impact neighbouring properties as much as possible. And I can confirm that what has been designed is reflective of policy SP16 and SP20, which is generic development management. And also that there's no material harm to neighbouring amenity in terms of national guidelines as well, which are available. The barn to the back, we were very keen to try and retain the character of that, the kind of more rural setting. Extending it enables it to be fit for purpose as a home office, as well as by cladding it at the moment, you may have seen in the photos, it's a breeze block, which is fairly unsightly for everyone. So the aesthetic will be very much like a stable block, but used for home working, which, as we're all aware of, is ever more important. The property itself, we're using local materials where possible and introducing sustainability elements, things like bat boxes, ground source heat pumps. These things will all help to meet the needs of a building that will hopefully exceed all our lifetimes, and genuinely feel that it is an asset, and really pleased to have the AONB officer and the conservation officer and planning officer also be very pleased with the scheme, and then with some minimal alterations which we've already completed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? In that case, we'll...
The proposed dwelling would be approximately 1 metre higher in its overall height at the ridge, although the rear wing is set down, and then the outbuilding, obviously that's in effect continuing the existing sort of roof height and profile. I think it's maybe 40 centimetres higher. It's not a significant incremental increase in the roof height. Yeah, Howsham, in terms of its topography, it's effectively on a slope, So yes, the further down the slope you go, obviously the properties higher up or do sit slightly higher. But at that particular point, it's it's not significantly increasing the height.
Shall we go into debate? Does anybody who wants to start debate? It's Councillor Cleary's ward, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Rachel, for your report and also conducting the site visit. I was pleased to go, and pleased that 2 other members were there also. Despite your excellent report, I was really very pleased that we did go and see it on site, just to get a feel for it in the flesh. I'm very happy to support this application. As I've heard from the agent, and I would agree, there is betterment involved here. The existing property, as we all, it's been described as something of its time. Let's leave it at that. What is proposed is going to be a much better, more sustainable family house. In terms of the appearance from the frontage, it will disappear into the very beautiful streetscape of Howsam. The back is different, but it's been criticised as not matching the front. Well, frankly, you don't see both elevations at the same time. In terms of the windows, there are already windows at the elevation, and the dormer windows, let's leave it at that they were things of their time. The back elevation is an outstanding design. In terms of the stables or the home office, it's a mere extension towards into the property of the existing building, and gets rid of a Nissan. It's a Nissan, not Nissan hut. And I will leave it at that. I'm very happy to move approval of this application.
Councillor Potter, do you wish to speak now, Councillor Potter?
Chair, I think I can very much echo what Councillor Cleary has said. The first thing I'd like to say is I'd like to congratulate the applicant on their submission, because it's quite clear that a great deal of effort and thought and detail have gone into this. I'm quite, and again, obviously the agent and architect and the officer's report, which reflects the effort and detail that's gone into it, certainly think it will be a great improvement to the streetscape of Howsham. I'm quite happy with more than happy with the design of the front. I also find the design at the rear perfectly pleasant, and as a sort of more modern design, it fits well in that situation. I can see no problem with it at all, and I'm quite happy to second it. Thank you.
I would just add a dissenting voice there. I could complain about the windows, but then I see that next door have got large solar panels on the roof, which perhaps are equally detract from, I think, from the conservation area. But the one thing that really bothers me is the fact there's that we're using zinc cladding at the back of the house. I can't. I'm sorry, but I can't get into my head the idea that zinc cladding is a suitable material for a conservation area. So I'm afraid I shall be abstaining. If everybody has spoken, we'll go to the vote. Can you do the vote, please, Jill?
Yes, Chairman. So the vote for the officer recommendation of approval. Councillor Andrews?
Abstain.
Councillor Brackstone?
For.
Councillor Cleary?
For.
Councillor Dockra?
For.
Councillor Goodrick?
For.
Councillor Mason?
For.
Councillor Potter?
For.
Councillor Thackeray?
For.
That's 7 votes for and 1 abstention.
Thank you, Jill. We'll now move on to the next item, which is the item 7, which is on page 91. The erection of a showroom, office and workshop building with associated car parking, service yard, external lighting, electricity, substation and landscaping for an agricultural business use at land off Eden House Avenue, Old Malton, North Yorkshire. Who's going to deal with this, Jill?
It's Neve, Chairman.
Right, Neve, can you... Over to you, Neve.
Sorry, it'll just be a moment. We don't normally have a monitor and a keyboard here, so at least I'll know it'll be here next time. Thank you. If we could just have the aerial map on to begin, that would be great. Thank you. Lovely, thank you. Yes, so the application site is an area of undeveloped land located to the north of Eden House Avenue, which is part of the location of the wider Eden Business Park development area. It's located to the west of the A169, as you can see on the map, and it's actually just directly to the east of the site where members recently recommended approval at August Planning Committee for the Highways England Depot and Salt Barn. So in this area, outline approval has previously been granted in 2015 for B1, B2 and B8 uses. Sorry, excuse me. The site also falls within the Malton Food Enterprise Zone. So as described in more detail in the report, the proposal seeks permission for the erection of a showroom, office and workshop building with associated car park and service yard, external lighting, electricity substation and landscaping for an agricultural business use to be occupied by Ripon Farm Services. Presently, that company has a unit within the York Road Industrial Estate. As you'll have been able to see, the design and access statement note that the company deal with the sale and repair of farm machinery, and this scheme has been specifically designed to meet their operational requirements. This proposal is before members solely due to the fact that it is a major application. There have been no letters of objection to this scheme. So if we could just go to the first photograph, please. So this photograph is looking west from Eden House Avenue, and the next photograph is another view from the west, where you can appreciate the landscaping belt to the north that's existing and would be retained. The next photograph is taken from a sort of formed T-junction that presently doesn't lead anywhere, just to the south of Eden House Avenue, but basically it's orientated directly northwards to approximately the middle of the application site. So it's quite good just for kind of anchoring yourself. The next photograph is looking from the existing unit to the south eastwards towards the new roundabout, and the next photograph is sort of a similar position taken looking towards the roundabout again. And if we could just go back to the map, that would be great. That's the end of the photographs. So as we noted in the report, It's officer's view that this is considered acceptable in principle, in policy terms, and it relates to an expansion and investment in the future of a company within Moulton. And it will also contribute to the provision of skilled jobs in the area, and additionally will ensure that there is specialist technical support available for those working within agricultural jobs locally as well, and the agricultural sector. In terms of design, the proposal is considered to incorporate a high quality appearance, and the form, materials and colour palette will result in visual continuity with the surrounding developments and the requirements of the design guide that was associated with the local development order. The site will furthermore be softened by a very well considered and varied proposed landscaping scheme. In terms of drainage, as noted, the site is formally designated within Flood Zone 3 by the EA. That wasn't the case whenever the 2015 outline approval was granted. But this does relate to a less vulnerable proposal in terms of the EA's flood risk vulnerability classifications. This has also passed both the sequential and the exception tests. The EA are content with the proposal subject to conditions. The Internal Drainage Board are also content as well, and there will be a condition recommended to secure emergency evacuation procedures, which is detailed in the list of conditions. As I'd noted in the report, there was a technical issue with consulting the lead local flood authority, who were consulted later in the process, and that's why members are requested to delegate the final decision to the head of planning, subject to the lead local flood authority approval. Some clarifications have been sought by the lead local flood authority, and it's hoped that this will be concluded shortly. The agent has confirmed that surface water drainage proposal is similar to those implemented at the site to the west, which is basically running to the IDB controlled surface water attenuation pond, which has already been constructed, and you can just see where that is on the map to the south. This previous scheme was ultimately considered to be acceptable by the lead local flood authority, but this will be double checked upon, and no decision will be issued until they confirm that they're satisfactorily happy with what has been proposed. Just in terms of another update, lighting was originally submitted as part of the proposal with a detailed lighting scheme. We've sought clarification and potential amendments to this, and this has been reviewed with the agent's lighting consultants presently. They've agreed that it will be more appropriate to attach a lighting condition that will require the submission of further details prior to the installation of any landscaping. So that gives us another final opportunity to make sure that we're content with what's been proposed and the levels and the numbers, and basically the form of the lighting as well, to make sure it's appropriate. Other than that, Highways England and North Yorkshire County Council Highways are content. There have been no letters of representation. Moulton Town Council were supportive, subject to acceptable mature screening, which we believe has been secured as part of the landscaping scheme. So therefore, the officer recommendation is one of conditional approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Niamh. I understand there are no members of the public who wish to speak. Do members have any questions? If members have no questions, then I would propose the officer's recommendation, and just say by explanation, members will be aware that I opposed. I bitterly opposed the site in the first place, but then these principles have been established, outline permission has been granted, and land is allocated, and it's been an eyesore to see that land, undeveloped land, just lying in a waste state for so many years. So I'm very glad that somebody has at last come along who's going to build something there and to tidy the place up. So I have no hesitation in proposing the officer's recommendation. Clearly.
Second approval, Chairman. No, thank you.
Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things. I see we're still within flood zone 3, which I regard as complete nonsense, because that's the highest classification of flood zone, and I've still never seen this area flooding, but there we go, it was the same for the last application. It's obviously good in the sense that this will provide new jobs and economic growth, hopefully sustainably. On that basis, I'm concerned yet again that there are no renewables, there's no solar panels on the roof. This is a massive area of roofing, and it is really disappointing. I was pleased to see that the planning authority had raised the issue of cycle storage, but again, this hadn't actually been raised on the plan. And I have to ask the question, who's taking this climate change stuff seriously? It does say in a couple of places about the high quality design in the design and access statement, and I couldn't actually see anything particularly high quality myself. It's just a bog standard shed, but it is a large area of roof, and it's a great waste really. But all in all, there's nothing to oppose on this one, so I shall be supporting it. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, I'd just like to make an overarching point about the location for the development, which I think is absolutely fine. But just to remind everybody in the room and outside the room that the planning permission for the Eden Park Business Centre, along with a very large housing development approvals for the Fitzwilliam Trust Corporation, were given in exchange for the gift of 5 acres of land for a new livestock market on the Eden Business Park site. It's just a reminder that that is still outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thackeray. Councillor Mason.
Yeah, I think this follows on from Mike actually. I was looking at to see what quality of build this actually is with regarding the standards of for insulation, fabric, everything else. And I couldn't find it anywhere in here. Mike's already mentioned the renewable energy provision, but as a council, we have a climate action plan, and we do seem to be letting people get away with quite a lot by not enforcing some of the conditions of it. Is there any conditions we can put in that it's at least built to a certain standard?
In terms of the policies that are within the local plan strategy, that is the guiding policies for us locally, there isn't anything that can sort of require that. But I think it is something that, as the plan is being considered in the future, I'm sure that will be considered at that point as well.
Any more questions? Does anybody wish to say anything else? Can we move to the vote?
Chairman, the vote for the officer recommendation. Councillor Andrews.
For.
Councillor Brackstone.
For.
Councillor Cleary.
For.
Councillor Dockler.
For.
Councillor Goodrick. For. Councillor Mason.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Thackeray.
For.
8 votes for, it's unanimous. Thank you.
To agenda item 8, which is for change of use, extensions, alterations and partial demolition of agricultural buildings to form climate positive distillery with visitor centre and shop, plant and storage buildings, office staff and staff facilities with 6 number LPG tanks and associated parking and landscaping at Ella's Farm, Buttercram. Is that you again?
Yeah, that is.
Would you like to give your report, please, Niamh?
Thank you, Chair. If we could just go to the aerial photograph first, that would be great. Thank you. Yes, so Eller's Farm is located to the south of the road that runs between Stamford Bridge and Buttercram. At March's planning committee, approval was granted for the formation of a climate positive distillery through the reuse and extension of former farm buildings. Adjoining the site to the east is an unconnected tourism business which provides accommodation for various size groups. A single residential dwelling, which is Eller's Farm Cottage, is located to the northwest, which you should hopefully be able to see on the map. The revised scheme has been submitted to the local planning authority as the largest building, which is highlighted there as Barn 2, sort of centrally within the site. That would have been converted to form the main distillery was actually demolished due to structural issues. Barn 1 and Barn 4 to the north and south of the site remain for conversion to storage areas. As you'll have seen in the report, the agent has provided a commentary on why Barn 2 was demolished, which was fully discussed, and this was actually informed by a more detailed structural investigation. So the justification behind this change is acknowledged. However, the revised scheme is very similar to that was previously approved, albeit with the rebuilding of Barn 2 rather than its conversion to a distillery building. The form, design and appearance of that building is almost identical to that which was previously proposed and approved, with only some very minor changes to the scale and position of windows and vents. It was noted during the officer's site visit that the replacement distillery building and adjoining plant room has actually now been substantially completed, a decision which was obviously taken by the applicant at their own risk. Other limited changes to the scheme include the increase in LPG storage capacity, which will continue to be biogas. If we could just move to the photographs, please. I'll just try and run through these quickly with you. The first photograph is taken looking at the main entrance of the application site. So this is looking southerly, in a southern fashion towards the centre of the site. The next photograph is again at the entrance, but looking more towards the east and the road that would lead to Buttercram. The next photograph is a view where you can appreciate Eller's Farm Cottage, and to the left-hand side of the cottage you can just see sort of a glimpse view of the rebuilt distillery building. The next photograph shows this from a more westerly position, and if you look at this in context with the landscaping plan, this is where the roadside planting of trees would occur. The next photograph is within the site looking towards the retained barn to the north that will be converted for storage. The next photograph is just sort of the same view but panning round to look towards the east and some of the accommodation for the tourism business in separate control. The next photograph is where you can start to appreciate the rebuilt distillery building itself, and whenever you look at the originally approved plans versus what is there on site, it does maintain a very, very similar appearance, and there are high quality materials used also. The next photograph is looking towards the sort of northern elevation of the distillery building and centrally within the site where previously a pole barn was removed. It was in very poor state of repair. The next photograph is again looking towards the north of the distillery building, and the next photograph is looking towards sort of the partial southern elevation of that, and you can appreciate it's still under construction, so that elevation is awaiting cladding. The next photograph is looking towards some of the other storage buildings on the site. The one that's more centrally located has been retained and converted. And the next photograph is where the LPG tanks would be located, sort of behind the building to be retained. The next photograph and the next photograph are just sort of showing where you would drive to go to the car parking that's proposed along the southern boundary of the site. And to that car park there would be additional hedging proposed also. I think that may be it for the photographs. Yeah. So just moving back to the sort of principle of the development, it was previously considered that this proposal was in accordance with policies SP1, SP6 and SP8 of the Radial Plan Local Plan Strategy. and it's officers' view that notwithstanding the changes, this remains the case. The proposal would still relate to the conversion and reuse of a more limited number of redundant agricultural buildings, but the new replacement Barn 2 Distillery building really does maintain the scale, form and appearance of the previous building that was approved for conversion. In terms of principle, it's also considered unlikely that a development of this scale could be readily accommodated within an existing industrial unit elsewhere within the district, whilst also being able to take advantage of local water abstraction, which is a key requirement for the distillery. In terms of character and form, the kind of very limited amendments and proposed minor alterations which I've run through are considered to be acceptable. They would retain the agricultural character of the site through the use of appropriate materials, including the vertical arch board and steel profiled roof panels, which we were able to see in the photographs. As I'd noted, a detailed landscaping scheme maintaining the same proposed landscaping, which includes, I believe, 33 new trees and hedging has been submitted and will be conditioned. In terms of amenity, the Council's Environmental Health Officer and Licensing Officer were consulted previously in relation to this scheme. They were content that, subject to the imposition of the previously recommended conditions and informative, that there would be no harm in terms of neighbour impacts or amenity, and that's considered to remain the case. In terms of some other consultees, North Yorkshire Highways and North Yorkshire Ecology continue to confirm no objection. The Environment Agency confirmed the recommendation of a condition, but they were content with the continued use of the surface water attenuation pond to the west of the site and the package treatment plant. There was no response from the parish council or any other third parties. Neither was there any response from East Riding of York Council, who were also consulted. So in light of those considerations and subject to the recommended conditions, we'd ask that this revised proposal is recommended for approval, as it's believed to continue to satisfy the relevant policy criteria. Thank you, Chair.
Right. I understand there's nobody who is registered to speak, rather. Are there any questions? Councillor Mason.
It's just a bit of definition, really. When they say bio LPG tanks, are they making the biogas on site, or is it just coming by tanker?
No, I think it is coming by tanker, but because of the higher capacity of sort of gas accommodation on site, there would be less journeys, which is...
Oh, it's more about guaranteeing it's biogas that gets delivered more than anything else.
Well, I was actually provided with, and I will just get it, a kind of specification, and it was confirmed that it would be biogas as well. Thank you.
Any more questions? If there are no more questions, we'll go into debate. I'm not sure who's the member for this ward. Councillor Mrs. Goodrick.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it is in fact in my ward. I'm not surprised that the pole barn wasn't fit, given that it's been there a great number of years, and I have been to the site before on a couple of occasions, looking at other applications that were in and out and so forth. So I'm hardly surprised that the pole barn was found to be not fit for purpose, and they've had to start from scratch. But I think it's a good business to be welcomed into the area with specific tourist attraction, and so I'm very happy that what they've done is still in keeping with what they meant to do with the original pole barn. So I'm happy to propose approval. Thank you, Chair.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Potter. Does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, only a couple of points. I was pleased to see when the application first went in that they were talking about being climate positive, so somebody does get it. I was also pleased to see that they've got a proper SUD strategy, including sort of treatment and reuse of water. So that is clearly possible where most applications seem to think that SUDS is strangely impossible. And yes, it's going to be a good thing for tourism, so I have absolutely no problem supporting this. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else? Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, at the risk of repeating some of what Councillor Potter and Councillor Mrs. Goodrick have said, it fits in entirely with what we support both as a council and as a committee in terms of rural land use. Food and tourism go hand in hand, as we know, and I'm very happy to support this application.
If there's nobody else who wishes to speak, we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Chairman. The vote is for the officer recommendation. Councillor Andrews.
For, Chair.
Councillor Brackstone.
For.
Councillor Cleary.
For.
Councillor Dockerer. For. Councillor Goodrick.
For.
Councillor Mason.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Thackeray.
For.
That's 8 votes for and unanimous.
We now go on to item 9, which is the change of use of former health clinic use class D1 to form 8 number 1-bedroom apartments to include rebuilding and first floor extension of parts with alterations to existing parking and landscaping at Pickering Clinic, Train Lane, Pickering. Who's going to deal with this one?
I think Alan should be on the line. So Alan Goforth, Chairman.
Alan, are you
yes,
there?
He's there. We can see him.
I'm here. Thank you, Chair.
Would you like to make your report?
Thank you, Chair. No updates to the reports published. If possible, please can we bring up the aerial photo of this particular site? Some members will be familiar with this site as it was the site of an application that came before Planning Committee in December of last year. That was an outline application which is referred to in the planning history section of the report and related to the demolition of the former clinic and its replacement with 4 dwellings. This application in front of members is reported to Planning Committee due to an objection having been raised by a member of the public. The concerns raised regarding noise, loss of privacy and parking provision. In terms of the proposal before members this evening, it involves the change of use of the existing building and a minor extension along with alterations to allow for the building to be used as 8 1-bedroom apartments. The site is previously developed land within a central location within Pickering, which is accessible to local services and facilities. It's considered that the use of the building would not result in any unacceptable overlooking or disturbance to neighbours of the site. And as confirmed by the Highways Officer, the proposed parking provision aligns with highway standards in a town centre location. As confirmed by the report, the proposed development complies with both national and local policy in relation to the redevelopment of previously developed land within development limits and would not result in any unacceptable impacts in terms of residential amenity, heritage assets, highways or flood risk. As confirmed by the report, the recommendation is for approval, subject to 9 conditions. Moving on to the photos contained within the slides on the presentation. If we can, yes, thank you. This aerial photo is a good angle actually. It shows facing west, shows the frontage of the existing building. I've highlighted the nearest residential property to the south, which is the detached property of Wayside, who have objected to the application. I've also highlighted the area which would be subject to the first floor extension and the rebuilding of part of the building, which is currently used as a boiler room and garage, and that's on the northern boundary of the site. Moving on to the next slide. This is taken from Train Lane facing west towards the frontage of the site. The main change from this angle would be that the access ramp along the frontage would be removed and the land would be regraded to allow for parking along the frontage. In terms of the overall form and scale of the building, in terms of the first and second 2-storey elements of the building, they would be unchanged from this viewpoint. Moving on to the next slide, please. This is facing back southward along Train Lane. So in the background, you can see the northern elevation of Wayside, the property to the south of the application site. Moving on to the next slide, please. Again, this is just to show the relationship between the nearest residential property and the southern boundary and the single-storey element of the building. At this end of the building, there would be no change in terms of windows and doors. The change of use would utilise existing windows at ground floor and first floor. Next slide, please. Again, just a close-up to show the boundary and the relationship between the two buildings. Also shown in the photo is the part of the building which would be the secure bicycle store for the occupants of the apartments. I think it was previously a pram store when the building was, I think it was used as a show start centre at one stage. Next slide, please. Again, facing back eastward along the southern boundary, just to show the relationship between the existing buildings. The existing building is obviously close to the boundary, but there would be no overbearing impacts or any loss of amenity through overlooking as a result of the change of use. Moving on to the next slide. This is taken from the position of the last photo, just panned round to show the western elevation of the existing building, and it also shows the area which would be the communal area that would serve the occupants of the apartments. Next slide, please. And now at this point we've moved to the northern end of the site, and this is facing towards the part of the building where there would be reconstruction works and a first floor extension. So the next slide will show a close-up of the area in question. So that the garage and the window to the left of the garage, which serves the boiler room, that would be demolished and reconstructed up to the same height as the existing two-storey part of that building. The northern elevation of the extension would be a blank elevation, so there'd be no windows facing northward to the rear of the terrace properties to the north. And the next slide, please. And this is the final slide, again, just to show the relationship of the building with the northern boundary and the adjacent land use. The extension would actually be adjacent to the parking areas which serve the terrace of dwellings to the north of the site. And I believe that concludes the slides for the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I understand there's no members of the public registered who wish to speak. Do members have any questions? Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. On page 170, it says the existing building has floor levels of 31.85 metres AOD. I think I'm right in saying that current regulations say that finished floor levels need to be at least 50, yeah, it's half a metre above the highest recorded flood level. Are you aware that the existing finished floor level, which is presumably staying the same, is actually going to be 50 metres above the flood levels? So not 50 metres, half a metre.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Potter. There'd be no change. Yes, you're correct that there'd be no change in terms of finished floor levels. Previous applications for the redevelopment have had to take on board the Environment Agency's requirements in terms of the finished floor levels. But in this case, with it being a minor application and change of use, and also in light of the history of the site and the lack of flooding, despite it being within flood zone 2, we're satisfied in terms of the finished floor levels in this case.
Thanks, Alan.
Any more questions? Councillor Mrs Goodrick.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wondered if the officer would clarify. You said at the start of the presentation, Alan, that the ramps were going at the front of the building. Is this to provide a graded parking area for the flats themselves?
Yes, Councillor Goodrick, that's correct, yes. So in terms of I believe there's a site layout plan there would be a number of spaces along the frontage which would be perpendicular to train lane. So there would be a gradient that would come down to the road that would allow cars to be parked. So yes, it does involve the removal of that access ramp.
Any more questions? Then if there are no more questions, we'll go into debate. Does somebody wish to make a proposal? Councillor Braxton.
Thank you, Chair. It's refreshing to see developers interested in building one-bedroom flats in Pickering. This type of accommodation is much needed, and the area in question is in rather a neglected and sorry state. And to this end, development would be very much welcomed. However, I just want to make two further comments. The first one picks up on the Town Council's concern about the size of some of the flats. 3 out of the 8 are rather on the small side, and one of those 3 only just meets the 37 metre square national space standard. As mentioned in the report, this is a minimum requirement for one-bedroom, one-person apartments, but we obviously have no control over how many people inhabit the space. My second concern, which again I don't think we can do anything about, is that these much needed flats will be built but then marketed with restrictions as to who can buy or live in them. We have an abundance of properties in Pickering marketed at a particular age bracket: Mickle Hill, McCarthy and Stone and Mill House, to name but a few. Yet we have hardly any accommodation for our younger working people. And I really think this issue needs to be addressed at some point. I'd love to see younger people given a fairer crack of the whip in this area, and hope that my suspicions here will be proved wrong when the flats are finally finished and put on the market. But I will support this application.
Is the proposal seconded? Councillor Potter, do you wish to speak, Councillor Potter? Does anybody else wish to speak? In that case, we'll go to the vote. Would you like to take the vote, please, Jill?
Thank you, Chairman. The vote for approval. Councillor Andrews?
For.
Councillor Braxton?
For.
Councillor Cleary?
For.
Councillor Dockwra?
For.
Councillor Goodrick?
For.
Councillor Mason?
For.
Councillor Potter?
For.
Councillor Thackeray?
For.
That's 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Jill. We now go on to item number 10, which is the erection of part 2-storey, part single-storey side extension following demolition of existing single-storey outhouse at the former Great Hampton Post Office, 7 Beach View, Hampton Lane, Great Hampton. Who will make the...
Thank you,
Ms.
Chairman.
Neve.
It's Ellie that will introduce this one.
Ellie, would you like to make the report, please?
Mr. Chairman, forgive me, but for transparency, I think the members of the public should be aware that Councillor Mason has left the room.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, this is a minor application which is a revision to a previous permission that was granted in October 2020. The application has been brought to Planning Committee for determination because the applicant is an elected Rydal District Councillor. No objections to the application have been received. The form, scale and style of the proposed extension is the same as what was previously approved. The only change to the design of the extension is that it is now proposed to have a white rendered finish. It is understood that this revision has been made as the applicant has been unable to find a good brick match to match his property. I do have one minor update to the report on page 189 of the agenda. It is stated that there are examples of render in the locality. Apologies, Chairman, but this is an error. The pub in this village is not rendered. There are very few examples of render in this village, but there are some examples of its use on gable ends. In addition to this, there is also one property in the locality which has been whitewashed and has a similar appearance to render. So if now we could go through the photos. So this is an aerial map of the site located on Hampton Lane, close to the junction with Kirby Misperton Lane. As such, there is quite a wide open space to the front and the side of the property. So this is the front of the property. You can see the existing outhouse, which I believe has now been demolished. The new extension will be slightly wider than that outhouse and will be of a similar scale to the main property, although it will be slightly set down. This is the rear of the property, where the single-storey section of the extension will extend out from, roughly to the edge of the patio there. So this image shows the spacing between the application site and the neighbouring property, which occupies a corner plot. You can just about appreciate from this image the land levels at the site and how the property is raised above the road and the footpath. And this photo has been taken from the back of the junction of Habton Lane, which shows the visibility of the eastern elevation of the property, which can be seen sort of centrally within the photo there. Effectively, this proposed development would result in that end gable being entirely rendered. I think that's the last photo. Yes.
Thank you. Is that the end of your report?
Not quite. Sorry. So it is considered that the use of render will appear quite prominent and visually bold within the street scene. However, it is considered that it will have a neat appearance, which is preferable to a badly matched brick. Therefore, on balance, the recommendation is one of approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Again, there's no speaker. So, do members have any questions? Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ellie, for your report. It's really just to highlight, and the question is to confirm, please, for the committee and for members of the public that there have been no objections, and the sole reason it is before committee is that the applicant is an elected member.
Yes, that's correct. The only reason it's here is because the applicant is an elected member. We have had no objections to the scheme. The Highways Authority were consulted and they recommended the same conditions as previously, but no objections to this one.
Any more questions? We go into debate then. Does anybody wish to make a proposal? Councillor Potter?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this is a very minor alteration to what has already been approved. I think it'll look perfectly acceptable. All we're talking about is a change of render instead of brickwork, and I'm quite happy to propose approval. Thank you.
Is that seconded? Councillor Cleary? Do you wish to speak, Councillor Cleary?
I second it. I don't wish to add anything further.
Anybody else wish to say anything? Can we go to the vote, please, Jill?
Thank you, Chairman. So the vote is recommended approval, offers a recommendation. Councillor Andrews?
For.
Councillor Braxton?
For.
Councillor Cleary?
For.
Councillor Dockwra?
For.
Councillor Goodrick?
For.
Councillor Mason. Councillor Potter?
For.
Councillor Thackeray?
For.
That's 7 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Can somebody go outside and invite Councillor Mason back in, please? Then we'll go on to item 11, which is alterations to include removal of render to front elevation to expose original stone walling, repair works to existing stone lintels, alterations to rear elevation to remove the existing lean-to roof, replace with a flat roof to match the existing, remove existing window and install new door to access flat roof for means of escape, new handrails, balustrades and external stairs from flat roof to external ground level, a new kitchen extract and supply ventilation ducts to a flat roof area Part of this application is retrospective, and it's in respect to the property is Bayhorse Inn, Main Street, Terrington. Who will make the report? Is it you again, Ali?
No, thank you, Chairman. It's me this time. Yes, members, the Bayhorse at Terrington is a public house that's been closed since 2011 and is currently under refurbishment. So this item 11 relates to a planning application. The property is a listed building, so item 12 is the relevant listed building consent application. In terms of the current planning application, this relates to the removal of render to the front of the property, which is retrospective. That has been done, it's been undertaken, and some alterations to the rear of the property, which largely amount to a reconfiguration of a section of roof to allow for the insertion of a fire escape door and fire stair, some additional ventilation ducts, and a small amount of noise attenuation fencing. Building Conservation Officer is of the view that the removal of the render is acceptable. It improves the fabric of the building, and the exposed stone preserves the character of both the listed building and the conservation area. She's also of the view that in terms of the works to the rear of the property, they amount to what she describes as some very limited harm to the building, but against a context of there being quite a lot of historical alterations to the property, which have compromised its special interest, together with the fact that the scheme is about bringing the building back into beneficial use, that limited harm is very much outweighed by bringing the building back into use. Members will note from the report that there is an objection from an occupier of a neighbouring property that relates to the removal of the render, and also raising concerns around the noise effects of the extraction equipment. In that respect, colleagues in environmental health have recommended a condition to secure extraction equipment of an acceptable specification. There are no other updates, Chairman, and the recommendation is as outlined. I would just make the point that I think there needs to be a minor revision to the wording of condition 3. I think that is intended to say something like before the operational use of the building rather than beneficial occupation. We can clarify the wording of that. The recommendation is as outlined, Chairman.
I take it you don't want to. You don't need to go through any photographs.
Sorry, there are two photographs, two very limited photographs. The first one is the front of the property with the render removed. There has been some repair works undertaken to the stonework and some repointing. I think until the works are done to the windows, that you won't really appreciate the fact that the building is going to look better, really. It still looks in a bit of a poor state, but once those windows are looking a bit better, I think it'll enhance the whole building. And then if we just turn to the second image, that's just the back of the property. You can just see to the sort of the right-hand side of the building a section of the pitched roof, the lean-to pan-tile pitched roof at sort of first floor level. You can just see the top of a little window peeping above that roof. That's the section of roof that will effectively become flat roof, and a fire escape door will be inserted where that window is, and then a small stair off the rear elevation of the property. I understand that the neighbour who has objected to the scheme lives in the property just to the right there. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. There's no speaker. So do members have any questions? Councillor Goodrick.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one question, Jill. Does the neighbour that's adjoining the Bayhorse, where the piece of roof is coming off, do they actually overlook that at any point, and vice versa? Would the flat roof overlook onto there, into any window that might be in that end? Sorry.
Off the top, no, I don't think there is. I think the concern raised was around noise, and there is going to be a section of acoustic fencing on the on the top of the flat roof section between the properties. So I haven't got an answer to the question about overlooking, but I certainly know that there will be a section of fencing that's, I think it's about half a metre in terms of an acoustic barrier, and then another just over another metre in terms of balustrade along that that elevation of the flat roof.
Are there any more questions? In that case, I'll ask, does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Potter? Sorry? Councillor Dockerer?
Yeah, I spoke to the chair of the parish council, and he seems, you know, happy with this. They're just obviously keen to get it open. There is concern over the noise from the extractor fan for the neighbour, but he was sort of, he said, you know, that they do live next door to a pub and we do want to see it operational. So, you know, they're happy to go along with it.
So you're proposing it?
Propose it, yes.
Not sure who got on there first, though. Is it you, Councillor Potter, then? You can second it, Councillor Potter? Would you like to speak?
Yeah, it's only a brief point. I can't see anything wrong whatsoever with this. And on page 198, where it says the render was a hard impervious cement render. So I'm glad to see that the awareness of the damage that hard cement mortars and renders are causing to buildings, particularly old stone ones, is becoming more, people are becoming more aware of this, and the more that we can spread the word about this sort of thing, the better. So yeah, I'm quite happy to second it. Thank you.
I just want to echo what everyone else thinks, really. I think this pub is a long overdue opening for Terrington. And I think from the last time we approved this, I arranged to have a beer with Caroline. Didn't we? So I look forward to it.
Councillor Mrs Goodrick?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think the villagers are very desperate for the pub to open, and what a joy to see a pub hopefully reopen in a village that hasn't had a pub for some considerable time. I've known this pub for nearly 37, 38 years. I think we decided we needed to go and have a drink in it when it does reopen, so I'm very happy to see that this has been proposed and seconded for approval, and I hope that the applicant gets on with it, and I get to get a drink in it before I'm dead.
Anybody else? In that case, it's been proposed and seconded. Can we go to the vote, please?
So the vote is for the officer recommendation of approval. Councillor Andrews?
For.
Councillor Braxton?
For.
Councillor Cleary?
For.
Councillor Dockerer?
For.
Councillor Goodrick? For. Councillor Mason?
For.
Councillor Potter?
For.
Councillor Thackeray?
For.
That's 8 votes for, that's unanimous.
We now go on to item number 12, which is the same property, but the listed building consent application. Is there going to be another officer report, or can we simply take the last report as
yes, there are no updates. It's essentially the same update and presentation as for the previous item.
Can we go straight to the vote on this one, or does anybody wish to speak first? Councillor Cleary.
For the sake of procedure, I propose that we I move approval. It needs seconding, then we're going to go straight to the vote.
Chair, I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Can we go straight to the vote, please, Jill?
So a vote for officer recommendation of approval. Councillor Andrews?
For.
Councillor Braxton?
For.
Councillor Cleary?
For.
Councillor Dockerer?
For.
Councillor Goodrick?
For.
Councillor Mason?
For.
Councillor Potter?
For.
Councillor Thackeray?
For.
That's 8 votes for, that's unanimous.
Thank you, Jill. We now go on to item 13, which is the erection of a single-storey extension to a front elevation at 1 Hillside Way, West Lutton. Ellie, I think you are the officer on this one. Would you like to give your report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, this is a minor application for a single-storey front extension to allow for porch and ground floor bathroom facilities. The application has been brought to Planning Committee for determination following some comments raised by the Parish Council in relation to the impact of the development on the street scene. These comments are detailed and considered in full within the officer's report. The property is a semi-detached property built as part of the Hillside Way development, but it occupies a plot which faces onto Back Lane. The proposed development is minor in scale and simple in form and will fill a re-entrant area to the front of the property. As such, it is not considered that it will unbalance the principal elevation of the property or have a harmful impact on the character or appearance of the street scene. If we could just move on to the photos, please. Thank you. So this is an aerial view of the site. You can see on the image the arrangement of the properties along Back Lane, how they're sort of grouped together in their semi-detached pairs and are set back within their plots behind quite large front gardens. So this is the front of the property. The new extension is proposed to be set within the re-entrant area where the current front door is there. So this is the view from the side. So the extension would extend out to roughly where the edge of the lawn is. So it would be slightly forward of the dwelling. And this is just another angle looking back into the sort of set-in corner section of the dwelling at the front there. So this image was taken from the main highway looking back into the site across its driveway. And this image was taken looking towards the property, which is on the left there, from in front of the attached neighbouring property. And this is just another image looking back towards the property from further along Back Lane. And I think that's the last photo. Yep, so thank you, Chairman. The recommendation is as outlined.
There is a speaker for this application. Katie Canrahan. Are you there, Katie? I understand we have a written statement. Would you like to read the written statement out, please?
I can do that. Yes, this is the script from Katie Hanrahan, who's the applicant, Chairman. Dear Sir, Madam, I am writing this script in relation to the proposed extension to the front elevation on the above address. I have lived in the village of West Lutton for 9 years, where my husband and I have found our family home and are raising 2 children. At present, we currently have 1 small bathroom on the first floor, and this has become increasingly difficult with just the 1 bathroom for a family of 4. This application is required to seek permission to erect a single-storey porch-style extension to the front elevation. Our intention is to improve our family home and create space for a bathroom that is in accordance with planning guidelines. The proposed extension will be visually appealing and constructed using building materials that are as identical to our house at present. The proposed build will look identical to what is visualised from the street scene at present, keeping the original front door and moving this forward within the entrant area. This will form the porch-style extension, which will accommodate a bathroom. The extension has been designed using the smallest area possible, but one big enough to accommodate a family bathroom. This is to ensure the extension looks an identical match to what is seen at present, is visually appealing and in keeping with the street scene. A window will be placed to the side of the extension to maintain privacy and allow air circulation within the bathroom, with no additional windows to the front to maintain the character of this property. This has been supported by the company we have used to produce our plans, who have taken into account the features within the local area to ensure that the build is visually appealing and is in keeping with the street scene. The neighbourhood consultation procedure highlighted no objections to the proposed build. Within this planning application, there are no known covenants on these styles of houses, and the proposed build has met all current planning guidelines. I would like to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak at this meeting with regard to my planning application. Kind regards, Katie Hanrahan. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor Goodrick.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one, and it's probably really clear, but the double glazed window doesn't say whether it is an obscure glazed with window, and I would imagine in a bathroom it would be, but it actually doesn't say that on the plan. Sorry. Thank you.
We can seek clarification for that. I think, sorry.
It's not proposed to be obscure glazed as such. It's not stated that it will be on the plans. However, there isn't any neighbouring property to that side, so there wouldn't be any sort of risk of overlooking or loss of privacy.
I'll just come back. It's above the toilet. I think I'd want it obscure glazed. Sorry.
I think it would be reasonable to request obscure glazing if it was to protect the amenity of a neighbouring, the occupiers of a neighbouring property. I think to protect the modesty of the occupants of the house, I think it's probably a matter of for their own choice, really. I suspect they will be obscure glazing it.
Are there any more questions? Does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Cleary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's a relatively modest extension. I think it's exercised the minds of some people because it's on the front elevation, not the back. However, it is in the reveal of the design of the building, so I'm, as I say, it's a very modest extension. I'm very happy to move approval.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Thackeray? Do you wish to speak, Councillor Thackeray?
No, I think it's fine.
Anybody else wish to speak? Can we, in that case, can we go straight to the vote, please, Jill?
The vote is to approve the application in accordance with the officer recommendation. Councillor Andrews?
For.
Councillor Braxton?
For.
Councillor Cleary?
For.
Councillor Dockra?
For.
Councillor Goodrick?
For.
Councillor Mason?
For.
Councillor Potter?
For.
Councillor Thackeray?
For.
That's 8 votes for. That's unanimous. Thank you, Chairman.
I think we then go on to the next item of the agenda, which is simply to note the applications determined by the Development Control Manager in accordance with delegated powers. I understand Councillor Thackeray has a question in relation to item number 4.
Yes, item number 4, which I've already said, my brother and sister-in-law are objectors to this application, and my question is simple, really. As far as I can tell, and I've got most of them here, there are 8+ objections, some incredibly detailed and legally charged, objections to the application. I just would like to know precisely why, given the level of objection to the application, that it wasn't brought before this committee for determination.
I'll try and answer this as best I can. In summary and in short, it's because it's an application for a certificate of lawfulness. It's not a planning application. So under our constitution, planning applications, where there are objections, come to members because they're considered and determined on the basis of their planning merits and on matters of planning judgment. So applications for certificate of lawfulness are different to that. They're not planning applications. They're effectively, there are two types. One is somebody can apply to say the proposed development or use is lawful. Others are certificates that aim to confirm that an existing use is lawful, and that can be sometimes where we have a use or a development that becomes lawful over the passage of time. This application was, the short-term terminology is a CLOPUD, so it's seeking a certificate of lawfulness that confirms that a proposed development is lawful. And I think in this instance, essentially, that's about is the proposed development effectively permitted development. So our consideration of the application is very much based on, it's not to do with the merits, it's based on facts and effectively the legislation. What do the regulations say around permitted development, and does this meet those tests? So that is the reason why they don't come to planning committee. Under our constitution, they're covered by the officer scheme of delegation, the certificates of lawfulness, rather than coming to planning committee when there are objections, because it's not an application that's determined on the basis of planning merit and planning judgment. It's a matter of fact and evidence, really. We do alert members of the public, third parties, to these applications, and that's because sometimes, particularly with the certificates of lawfulness for existing uses, some of the information they get back is valuable in terms of us sort of weighing up the evidence, looking at the evidence to work out whether something is lawful. So that's the reason for that. And clearly this did raise some concerns. It was something that we did take legal advice on. We sought council's opinion in assessing the application for lawfulness, and it is all documented in the officer report, which is on the planning portal on the website. But that's the reason for it.
Could I just ask a supplementary question, please? Should there be a planning application to be submitted for a dwelling on the site located that you listed lawfulness covers? Could that then come before the committee, given the level of objection that there has been already?
Well, it would trigger a planning application. That development would need a planning application, and if there were objections to it under the scheme of delegation, then it would come to planning committee.
Are there any other questions on the scheme, on the delegated powers? And then there's an appeal decision which is at the back of the papers, the Wimbledon case, which we're all aware of. If there's no, Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In respect of the appeal for the application for costs, and I refer to page 258, item 12. I hope it's not a bowling opposer, but the applicant raises issues regarding the voting processes at the committee. Do we know to what he's referring?
Councillor Cleary, I'm afraid I don't at the top of my head, but I can find out, and I will let you know.
Thank you.
It's interesting that he does make the point, that the inspector does make the point that once the appeal process has commenced, the council has lost the ability to determine the application. The decision making then falls to the planning inspectorate. The purpose of the report to the council's planning committee was to seek the members' views on that, on what decision they would have made if they were able to determine the application. At this stage in the process, it is understandable that the council refused to meet with CAA or review the case any further, as they could not make a decision. Given the above, I found that the council had not acted unreasonably in this regard. I think that sort of summarises the case. Unfortunately, as we didn't have to make the decision, if if this thing ends in tears, we won't be responsible.
You're quite right, Mr. Chairman, and it's we you know, councils and committees in particular are often judged on their appeal score, and this is one that we should not suffer for.
Absolutely not. Councillor Goodrick.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Disappointed, but there you go, that the appeal was upheld, but delighted no costs were awarded, Chairman.
What I find disappointing is that the extra condition that we tried to support the objector with was not upheld. But apart from that, I think it was as expected. Right. In that case, can I declare the meeting closed? I declare the meeting closed.